Thank you. Good morning. My name is Shannin Metatawabin. I'm the Chief Executive of the National Aboriginal Capital Corporations Association. I'm also a member of the Fort Albany First Nations of the Mushkegowuk Nation. I would like to thank you for the invitation to speak today. Before I start, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm taking this call from the traditional territory of the Mi'kmaq Nation. The National Aboriginal Capital Corporations is a representative organization of over 50 Aboriginal financial institutions, which provide developmental lending to hundreds of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis businesses across Canada. Aboriginal financial institutions are an incredible success story. During a 30-year program partnership with the Government of Canada, since 2014, delivering the Aboriginal Entrepreneurship Program, Aboriginal financial institutions, with help of modest federal subsidies, have provided over 50,000 loans totaling $3.3 billion to First Nations, Inuit, and Métis-owned businesses. Each year, Aboriginal financial institutions make over $120 million in loans to Indigenous-owned businesses. Aboriginal financial institutions have a current aggregate loan portfolio of $329 million. Indigenous businesses are a key driver of employment, wealth creation, and better socioeconomic outcomes for Indigenous communities and people. Every loan provides 3.34 jobs, life satisfaction increases by 72%, mental health is improved by 52%, and health by 19.9%. During the last election, all major parties committed themselves to undertaking the important work of walking the path to reconciliation. I'm here to suggest to you that reconciliation is not possible if Indigenous people continue to be excluded from the Canadian economy and from sharing in Canada's long history of prosperity. Indigenous nations want to end the economic exclusion and be full partners in this confederation. This is what we mean by economic reconciliation. The National Aboriginal Capital Corporations Association is offering 3 recommendations that would contribute significantly to ending economic exclusion and could be important cornerstones for economic reconciliation. These recommendations build upon the already proven successful models of co-designed partnerships between Indigenous people and Canada. First, create an Indigenous housing fund and partnership with Aboriginal financial institutions. The Government of Canada's pay-as-you-go approach to funding housing and infrastructure has long been criticized. It is inefficient. It defies proper planning, has negative consequences for Indigenous communities. It is time for a more functional life cycle approach to financing housing infrastructure. Indigenous affairs ministers from both Liberal and Conservative governments have conceded that real change is needed. NACCA proposes the creation of $150 million Indigenous housing funds from which Aboriginal financial institutions could leverage financing for individual and community housing. The Indigenous Housing Fund would use the proven track record of the Aboriginal financial institutions that provide Indigenous lending right now to developmental lending. The Indigenous Housing Fund would emulate the successful model of the recently created Indigenous Growth Fund, which was structured by NACCA and the Business Development Bank of Canada and connects private investors to Indigenous businesses while relying on AFIs to deploy the capital based on their unique relationships with the communities we serve. Second, the additional funding for the Aboriginal Entrepreneurship Program announced in Budget 2020 must be made to meet the needs of the current needs and made permanent. COVID-19 pandemic has had significant impact on Indigenous communities and businesses, and these impacts have exacerbated the longstanding marginalization and economic exclusion of our people and communities. The Aboriginal Entrepreneurship Program directly supports Indigenous-led businesses and help Indigenous communities generate wealth by improving access to capital and business opportunities. Third, to provide 10-year funding agreements to qualified Indigenous institutions. The Government of Canada is now providing 10-year grants to First Nation communities that meet eligibility requirements related to financial performance and governance. Both Canada and First Nations agree that there are significant benefits to these arrangements, including greater flexibility to deliver and design, greater flexibility to allocate, manage, and use funding to better accommodate local needs and changing circumstances and priorities, the ability to retain unspent funds and reduce administrative and reporting burdens. Such arrangements should also be available to Indigenous institutions that have successful track records, strong financial performance, and good governance. In the case of AFIs, this would allow for greater responsiveness to changing on-the-ground economic conditions and opportunities to allow for long-term planning that would contribute to better program management and service delivery. I would like to conclude with the following. Aboriginal financial institutions have an inevitable record supporting Indigenous businesses across Canada. We are proud of our success and 30-year partnership with the Government of Canada. Our success is a testament to the view that Indigenous organizations are best placed to design and deliver programs and services to Indigenous people. We believe that the network aligns with your stated commitment to reconciliation. Further to other witnesses' comments, I would like to reinforce that supporting Indigenous economic development and institutions in Canada will serve to align with the spirit and intent of the United Declarations on the Rights of Indigenous People. More importantly, will be an investment by Canada to create a sustainable Indigenous economy and save Canada from the growing unsustainable trend in costs associated with government's responsibilities to Indigenous community. Thank you.